Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices and you can sign up for product alerts. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be going over the best games of the year of many different categories. Now last week I put out some videos of specific categories and many games of some of those categories. But in this video, there's going to be a ton of different categories I have not mentioned. I'll also be reiterating just the best of some of the categories I've already covered. So if you've watched some of those other videos, there's a timestamp below when we get to that. If you want to skip right over, it's easy to do so. But you're going to see a lot more categories in this one. So let's get started. All right, here we go. My number one two-player game of the year. Now this is a game from designer Bruno Cathala, and it's called Sobek 2 Players. Here's a 1-minute overview of how this game works. Sobek 2 Players is a set collection game where you're going to be collecting different types of goods, but also using special characters for special abilities. And at the end, you're going to be adding up all your different sets, the number of tiles times the number of scarabs, and you're going to be adding numbers of coins that you get from this bag throughout the game. You're going to be collecting tiles by moving the ankh in the direction, but then setting it in the direction that that tile talks about. You can play a character for your turn and do all sorts of cool things, like grabbing any tile in the entire board or getting a bunch from the stack. Or on your turn, maybe you're selling a set and you need at least 3 of them to sell. And if you're a little short, you can use a character that has that type of good as part of that set. But the timing of that selling is important because you get to secretly look at some of these abilities and activate one. And these do all sorts of cool things like taking another turn immediately or adding scarabs to your sets or many more. And you don't even have to take the first tile there. You can take another one that you really want, but you must add all the ones you skipped to your corruption. And corruption's bad because whoever has the most at the end of the game, the other player gets a coin, and they might get more coins if you have a lot more than that. And whoever has the most points from all their different sets plus coins is the winner. Yeah, I love this game from the instant I played it. It has so many things going that I love just about games. Has the this is co-designed by Bruno Cathala. It's also co-designed by the designer Sebastian Pochan, the designer of Jaipur. And it's interesting because this game has, you can feel like it has like the timing of selling like Jaipur does, but it has a lot of sort of like abstract moving that Bruno loves to design in the game. So these two designers have come together using their best tools and it just makes a beautiful game. You're constantly looking at the board and you're going, oh, if I do this, they'll do this, and that will give me this. And you're thinking 2 or 3 turns ahead. You're trying to figure out what do you want, but what are you setting your opponent up for when you move that ankh and you take that tile? Also, do I want to take this tile for free or do I want to really take this one and take some corruption which might be worth negative points? Do I want to try to get a little bit of random pressure luck with trying to get some of those coins? When do I want to sell? Do I want to sell now to get the better special abilities? Or do I want to wait off and try to wait for a bigger set because you need at least 3 of them to sell? There's so many things to think about in this quick game. It's 30 minutes long. That's it. But there's so much tension. There's so many things to think about. So many different ways to skin the cat in this one. There's just so much. There's a ton of depth for how easy this game is to teach and play. The short-term gain versus the long-term planning versus the timing versus saying when that game's going to end or whether it's not. Oh my gosh, this game has so many great things. If you want to see more, go see my full review at Sobek 2 Players. Right, Dice Game of the Year is going to be Baseball Highlights the Dice Game. Let me give you a 1-minute overview of how this works. Baseball Highlights the Dice Game is a standalone roll and write game based off the hugely popular Baseball Highlights 2045, where 1 to 4 players are going to be playing simultaneously on their own park. Players will be hitting singles, doubles, triples, home runs, and having walks and stolen bases. Over multiple rounds, each player is going to have their own park, and they're going to be using those aspects to work down specific tracks in hopes to score the most runs in the end. Each round, each player gets a chance to be the active player, and you can take all of the dice of one type and activate it that many times. So 3 triples, for example. So as we mark off these 3 triples, once we get to this one, this is a chained action, which now allows us to cross off 1 in the doubles action spot, which here actually gets us a double, which puts a runner right on second base. And if we use our last die for this turn and you see a star and you mark this off, you get to use this twice, double it. But if you don't end your dice on here, well, you don't get to use it at all. A little bit of pressure luck and setting yourself up for strategies for future rounds. Now that triple will score this runner, and the second triple will score this runner. And we now have 2 runs. And as the active player is doing that, all other players are simultaneously taking any 2 actions that have at least a die on it, but they don't take the dice off the board. And then we look at the pitcher die to see what happens to our runners. In this case, nothing. It was a good inning. But it might be bad like a triple play, removing up to 3 base runners on your bases. Or maybe a double play removing 2 runners, removing your furthest base runner. But it's not always bad. You might actually get a stolen base once in a while. And then the dice used by the active players rolled back onto the board along with the pitcher die for the next active player. As you move down these tracks, you might activate a clutch hit, which moves you down this track and can activate other things like singles, doubles, triples, and a lot of home runs if you go far enough. Or you might activate a power dice. And for each one of those you've unlocked, you get to roll one of the power dice while you're the active player to give yourself more options. But don't worry, none of the other players get to use it. And you'll play a certain amount of rounds depending on the amount of players, and the most runs wins. And there's also a solo variant where you can play against Hits Fits. Baseball Highlights, the dice game, is for ages 8 and up, and it takes only 20 minutes to play. Yeah, like much of you maybe, I'm pretty burnt out on roll and write games and flip and write games. And when this one came out, I'm like, okay, another roll and write, let's play it. And I was captivated by it. I loved it. It's so interesting the way that you're trying to work down these different tracks, but some of them are linked to other tracks, and you're trying to decide which things to go for. And of course, I always like it in roll and writes where one player gets a choice and then leaving things for other players. So you're always doing things on your turn. You're getting either one very powerful thing when you're the active player, or you're getting 2 different things that aren't quite as powerful when you're not the active player. And I like that. And there's certain parts of this where like that has to be like the last thing, the only thing or the last thing that you do that turn to get double. Otherwise it's nothing. So some interesting sort of press your luck a little bit there. Also, the defense die. Rolling that thing can totally change your strategy. It's like, oh, there's a triple play this round? Great. I don't want to leave anybody on base. So what I'll do is and I don't have anyone on base, so I'll try to like work my way up my tracks to set myself up for future turns where there's not a triple play. And you're kind of working your way out there. So your strategy will change every turn too based upon the defense die. I really like that. It is just a clever, fun thing. Sometimes you're doing things and you're comboing with the clutch and getting this and getting that, and that links to this and this links to that. Combo building in this is a huge thing, and that's fun. There was also it's sort of a little expansion called Football Highlights, the dice game, which is similar but also still feels different. If you're going to get one, I would recommend getting both because they're both very good but different, same right. Baseball Highlights, the dice game. For this, I have Grand Austria Hotel Let's Waltz. And in this one, it came with 5 different modules, I believe. And one of them just adds a ton of new things, a whole new ballroom with dancers, and you're going to be trying a new champagne resource that you're going to be using to send players to the ballrooms, and those ballrooms are randomized each game, and they all score in different ways, and you're trying to figure that out, but they also go with different goals that you might get. So there's a big, huge sort of module, but then there's some also smaller modules that you can mix right in, which is what I love with expansions is you can mix in new staff cards. You can have like a new special hotel with a special ability, right? Which is very easy to do. There's ways to just easily mix things in or just turn things in just a tiny bit where you could probably play that with somebody with the first time that they're playing, because now there's like a new almanac that you can look at what all the cards do. There's new guests. So you can mix in guests and staff cards right away and just give yourself a ton more even replayability without adding a whole lot of new mechanisms. And I love that about this. So I love it for that. You can just easily mix in a bunch of different cards, give yourself more replayability, or you can add some of the bigger, more grandiose modules to make it turn a regular sort of medium weight Euro game into an absolutely brain burner that makes you play the game very different. That's why this got my expansion of the year. All right, my number 1 reprint here. I recently did my top 100 video games of all time, just in the last 2 months. My number 2 game in that series was this game, Mr. Jack in New York. Now you can go back and watch that video as to why that game is so amazing. But it's been out of print for a little while, and so this year they just reprinted a new version. I'm not even sure it's quite here in North America yet. I got an early copy. I actually reviewed it. I had actually never reviewed this game. In this game, you are, it's a two-player asymmetrical game that takes 30 minutes to play. One of you is Jack the Ripper, one of you is the investigator. Jack the Ripper is secretly disguised as one of the 8 characters in the game, and the investigator is trying to figure out which one of those 8 is them by deduction and ruling things out as the game goes on. And Jack is trying to hide and at the right time try to escape or trying to last 8 rounds. Each of the rounds is really interesting, where one player gets the first move, the other player gets 2 moves in a row, and then that first player gets the last move. Very interesting take, push and pull, tug of wars. You're building the board as the game's being played, where you're putting different tokens out like metro stations that allow you to jump around. Lights that help you stay in the light to catch Jack, or parks that allow you to hide if you're Jack. You're literally creating the board as you're playing it. Game has a ton of tension. It's similar to like a hidden movement game, even though it's not, because Jack is moving in a hidden way, but he's actually on the board. You're just trying to figure out which one is him. This is a fantastic game that soon will be back for more players to play it. In the new version, it's new art. They've shrunk the board, shrunk the cards, and shrunk the box so they could sell it at a better price and make it easier to afford, because it's just basically tiles, a board, and some tokens. From the components, the game is very simple. But this is second best game of all time for me, and because they're bringing it back, this is gonna be my number 1, Mr. Jack in New York. For Party Game of the Year, it's gonna be called So Clover. Let me give you a 1-minute overview of how this one works. So Clover is a word-based cooperative game for 3 to 6 players, where each player is gonna get one of these clovers with some random cards on them, and you're trying to link together on each of these clovers the 2 words that are closest to it. So each player will secretly write the words they're linking, like Leonardo for statue and brush, like Leonardo da Vinci's a painter and they have statues of him. Games for travel and puzzles, because games go with both of those. Cougar and oil. Mercury Cougar is a car and you put oil in a car. Vampire and turtle. Blooded. Blood for the vampire, and turtles are cold-blooded. So maybe that happens. So we try to get everyone to guess which one is which card goes where, and how it is oriented. Once everyone's done, each player's gonna get a 5th card that they'll randomly shuffle in with theirs. Everyone sees what we've written and the 5 cards, and everyone has to collaboratively figure out together which card goes where. The more you get, the more points you get, and you do this for every player. Yeah, even the minute I played this game, I'm like, oh man, this game is so special. And I just love I love creative word game party games. And sure, this one is not as much of a sort of like goofy party game as some other years, but this one is more of a thinky party game, but it's cooperative, it's really fun. And you're just, it's so fun to see what other players see in things. Like, oh no, that and that doesn't go with that, this goes with that. Well, then that means that something else has to get booted out here. What goes out here? And you go down sort of like these rabbit trails, and it's the conversations that you're having that makes this game so special. And then when the other player finally tells you what the answer was, and they tell you what their thinking was, and you share those, that's what makes this game special. It doesn't play as much of a higher player count as some of the party games. Now, by the way, this actually doesn't even say it plays with 2 players. I think it says plays 3 to 6. And 2 players actually works just fine, because you're both writing your answers and then you're both figuring each other's out at the same time. You don't have the conversations, which makes this game special, but if you do like really sort of thinky, sort of codename style word games, that works really well too, where you're both just trying to think each other's answers out and talking out loud so the player can hear you. It still works with 2 players, even though it says it doesn't. But Party Game of the Year, So Clover. And as you're playing this, the whole time you're going to be just saying, this game's just so clever. Like, meaning clever, of course, but you're just going to find yourself saying that because it is. Yeah, for this, I'm going to be going with Ticket to Ride Europe 15th Anniversary Edition. I just love how they made the board just so much more vibrant and colorful. I love the huge board. Gave it the same treatment that the 10th Anniversary Edition got a few years ago. I love that each player not only gets their own trains, but they have their own huge sort of like tin holder for that. I just love the way it looks on the table. All these humongous trains going around. It's just awesome. It just looks so good. They did it the right way, like they did with the 10th Anniversary Edition, and just the step up between playing the regular Ticket to Ride Europe versus this is such a big step up. And that's why this got my presentation of the year. All right, here it is, card game of the year. This is Enchanted Plumes, and it's from Calliope Games. Let me give you a 1-minute overview of how this is played. Enchanted Plumes is a card game for 2 to 5 players. You're going to be building tableaus of different peacocks with beautiful plumes and trying to score the most points. So you'll be building peacocks with these cards, starting with the top row and working your way down, hopefully all the way to the bottom where you complete that peacock. Because at the end of the game, you're going to count up all the positive points except for the top row, which are actually negative, which is why you want low points here. But if you finished it, you also get a bonus 1 point for every card, so you're really trying to complete your peacocks. And you'll be making plenty of them over the course of the game. And after playing 1 or 2 cards, you're going to be drawing and or swapping from your hand with the tab below, which brings in lots of player interaction. Whoever's done the best job building the highest scoring peacocks at the end is going to be the winner. Yeah, as you can see, it's a beautiful game. It's thematic and looking with all these crazy peacocks, and they just look beautiful on the table, especially when they're finished. And it has such an interesting aspect of laying low cards on the top row, but you want the higher points down below it. It's a reverse pyramid. Once you go down, you can't play cards up. You've got to use the same colors, at least one color from before. So if you get sort of stuck and you have to play multiples of the same color, it really limits which colors you can play a little bit further down. You got a little bit of press your luck where you're trying to make a really big peacock, but not too big because those are really hard to score. You're trying to hold cards from other players. You're trying to use the tableau of where you draw the cards, where you're swapping cards as possible temporary storage. This game has a lot in common with a classic, amazing, best 2-player game card game ever, Lost Cities. Has a lot of, it's very different from that, but some of the feelings that you get from that in this 2-player game, hoarding the cards that your other player wants, excruciating discarding decisions as to when you don't want to play a card that discard because you know that's the color they're working for, but your hand's full and you kind of need everything. It's so good. It's such a simple game, but it has so many good things to think about. You can go watch my full review of this where I show you all the details and I dive even deeper into why this game's amazing. But if you like classic 2-player card games like Lost Cities and you like tableau building, oof, this is it. This one really took me from surprise. This is a fantastic card game, Enchanted Plumes. Most innovative game of the year for me is Return to Dark Tower that just came in the last week of this year. And the innovation of this is not only the way that they just redid and reimagined the classic game, but the innovation in the tower that is here and the intelligence that tower has, not even just the innovation of the gears and the engineering. If you go and you look at how this thing was designed and all of that went into it, it's insane, the inner guts of this thing. Even just how it was built is innovative. But what it does to the game and the way that the app, because the app runs it as well, but the way that the app kind of knows what's happening in the game. It knows how well you had a battle. It knows other things in the game and can change things that's going on with the tower and what the tower does depending on how the game is going. And it's just amazing. It's so innovative. It's like, oh, this happened and this happened. You don't even know it. This is all happening in the background. But things are happening based upon that. And the way that the doors open, the things light up, and it does a different sounds, and it spits skulls out of the thing. I got a chance to play an earlier copy of this at PAX last year, and got a chance to play it. It's really fun, but the innovation of the technology that went into that tower that really brings into gameplay a better experience is why it's my most innovative game of the year, Return to Dark Tower. All right, this one, well, family game of the year for me. This is Renature, and this is brought to us by Capstone Games. This is a game that came out earlier this year. I know BGG says it's a 2020, but the pre-orders didn't even start showing up till January here. So Renature from Capstone Games. Let me give you a 1-minute overview of how this works. Renature is a beautiful domino laying game where you're going to be placing dominoes and matching animals when you do that, and possibly placing plants in areas that are beside where you've placed. And you'll be placing different plants that have different heights that give you more and more power. Because these plants will give you points when you place them for plants of equal or lesser size, and when these areas are completely surrounded, not diagonal, you'll score. The higher points for the higher power and the lower for the lower, but the one that closes it gets an endgame point as well. And certain animals are wild, giving you more flexibility and being able to place any animal next to them. But players can be sneaky because they all have neutral pieces, and if they tie, they're not considered there, so you can cause other players, including you, to score and swoop in and get the big points. And in this case, if you're all alone, you get all the points. And you can spend clouds, which can do cool things like change the wild animal, or take another turn, or take back some of the pieces that you've placed earlier. Once the dominoes run out, you'll have some secret endgame scoring, and whoever has the most is the winner. I love it when games in the modern era by master designers use mechanisms that are common to all of us or have been like past classics, like dominoes. And in this game, you're basically playing dominoes with a twist, with beautiful animals on the dominoes, but it's so simple. Play a domino, possibly place a tree. But even with how simple that is, oh my gosh, there's some tough decisions in this game. If you're gonna place a tree, where are you gonna place it? If you're gonna place it there, I might wanna use this one. If I wanna place it there, I wanna use this one. A lot of this has the timing to it. Plus, it's also like, oh, I'm gonna place here, and I'm gonna place a neutral tree to totally screw over somebody else and make it so that they're not even there, they can't score. The whole aspect of if someone's tied when they're scoring, there is thought to not be there. That was used in like Las Vegas, for example, a really popular game, and it works so well that the nuances of this game and the timing of when you place something where, this game is an in-your-face, confrontational game. This is a little meaner than most family games I'd put on a list, but it's not quite heavy enough to be like a strategy game. It's kind of in the middle there. But this was a game that came out so early, and for most of the year, this was the best game running. I still really love this game. It's just so clever, and there's a lot of nuances to this game where the mechanisms are simple, but man, there's so much depth here. If you don't like mean, confrontational, I'm gonna screw you over, you thought you were gonna get points, I just took them from you by doing something clever that you didn't see coming, and then this isn't gonna be the game for you. But if you like sort of that aspect of being right in players' faces and really fighting over areas and area control, but you want it to look like and feel like a classic, but also have some very tough decisions to make, oh man, this is it, Renature. For most immersive, it's going to Sleeping Gods from Red Raven's games. Now, this is a cooperative sort of exploration game where you're a crew and you're doing different things on the ship to take actions. You're going to be going off and just finding your way and trying to awaken the gods. And you're going to be going around and there's a humongous book. And when you go to a certain spot, you're going to read something. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure style thing, but there's also some game mechanisms that are sort of in this. Sometimes you're going to be doing combat, and that gets down to a somewhat complicated thing to take them out. But the reason why this is so immersive is the story writing in this. I've said this before and I'll say it again, that I think Ryan Locke is probably the most talented person in gaming. The way that his brain works, I know his wife helps him as well, and the way that he is the designer, he is the artist, he is the publisher, he does he's crazy. He's a Superman. But the writing in this is so good, and it's so immersive, and it draws you in, and it makes you want to keep playing. Like, oh, I heard this, well, let's go over there. And it's just so whimsical, and the way that the writing is just it. It's why this game is so immersive. If you like exploration games, choose your own adventures, but ones that also have a lot of mechanisms going on as well, then Sleeping Gods is definitely going to be one you want to check out. For Cooperative Game of the Year, this is going to The Crew Deep Sea Mission. Now, this is a follow-up standalone game to last year's Cooperative Game of the Year, The Crew. The mission to Deep Space Nine, I forget what that it's called, where that was a space theme. This is the sea theme, but they've changed a lot in the system. Where now it's a cooperative trick-taking game where you're basically playing tricks, but each player will, at the beginning of each round, will draft a certain sort of task that they have to do. Like it might say, I won't take any red cards, or I won't win a trick with a 9, or something like that. But players are going to have these, and you've got to get through them all in order to win the round. Well, in this version, they changed it up so that now, for the level, you get a certain amount of cards, difficulty level. And so the cards, and then when the cards come out, the cards themselves are what have the actual task on there. It's not necessarily in like the log book that you're going through. So you could play this with multiple different groups, and each time you play it, even from the start, you're gonna start easier and get harder. But even when you play round one, it's gonna be completely different with this group, with that group, with this group, with that group, because the randomization of those cards, they just have difficulty numbers on one side, but then a different task on the other side. So you'll draw up to a certain difficulty, and now it's different. So it brings all of the excellence from that great cooperative trick-taking game from last year called The Crew, but brings it into a much more refined system that makes the game a lot more replayable for more groups. That's why this won Cooperative Game of the Year, The Crew Deep Sea Mission. All right, we are at Strategy Game of the Year. Here we have Witchstone. Let me give you a 1-minute overview of how this works. Witchstone is a strategy game for 2 to 4 players where each player will have their own cauldron and they'll be placing hex tiles to do actions and different powers of them depending on how many of the same symbol you can link together. Now in the big cauldron on the board, you're going to be building networks of energy which are going to score you points as you complete them, but also allowing you to bring witches in and moving them around and putting them in different locations, gaining you different actions and endgame points. But you're also doing that to try to fulfill prophecies and endgame goal cards, like having your witches in certain locations or having networks to certain locations, or even the amount of witches on the board getting you a certain amount of points. More and more, the better you do that prophecy. You might also be using wand actions to fly down a track and getting actions and even better versions of them if you're the first one there. Or moving around the pentagram, not only gaining actions that you can use one time for good power, or using them on your board for multiple uses, or getting the best points as you pass different spots. And whoever does the best job puzzling out their cauldron, getting the prophecies and fulfilling those and getting points throughout the game for the end game goals, is gonna be the winner. Yeah, this game is just fantastic in so many ways that I love that Reiner Knizia used his mechanism of selecting actions the same way that you play the tiles in Ingenious, one of his older titles that should have won the Spiel des Jahres, but I think it went up against Ticket to Ride that year. And you're comboing those actions as the more things of that you can put next to each other, the stronger that action is. And each of those actions do totally different things. This is like a point salad that feels like a Stefan Feld game, even though it's a co-designed by Reiner Knizia. And you're trying to combo together these things so you're getting this and then getting that and then getting this. So I get points for this, I get points for that, I get points for this. It's so clever, but driven by that ingenious mechanism is awesome. And you're going off and you're building a network of energy that you're going to be using to bring your witches on the board to go get certain things. And you're setting yourself up to move faster on the board because there's some end game goals that will be getting you things. Or you're getting points for even just finishing those goals. But you can go to the pentagram and get a bunch of extra actions and possibly points. You can race down the wand track and get points. So many things to do here. Tons of, it's just so great. Moving those gems out of the way. This game feels different every time you play it. And there's a decent amount of player interaction where you're trying to like race to certain things, plus get to the board certain things. It plays well with 2. You can play this game in with 2 players in 45 minutes. It is a lot of game for 45 minutes. And then of course it can go up to possibly 90 minutes if you're playing with 4 players. But for this game is just great. It's a medium weight Euro. It has a lot going on, but it's very, very good. Witchstone. Now, Game of the Year, I'm not going to give it up today. I'm actually going to say it in my next video, which is coming out tomorrow or 2 days from now, where I will do the top 10 of the year. And by the way, with all these category videos, I usually don't ever put a game more than once, which means my game of the year has not been said in any of the videos that I put out this last week, which are a ton of videos on the best games of the year. You're gonna have to find that out tomorrow. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe so you don't miss that one coming up. Top 10 of the year coming up. This has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games by helping you find the next one you love. Game Toppers not only transforms your existing table to a high-quality gaming solution, they now offer full leg kits and dining cover solutions for the full table application. Paired with their amazing, thematic, premium stitch edge mats from noted board game artists like Vincent Dutray, collapsible cup holders, and really cool accessories, it's a complete system that upgrades every game you play. Go to GameToppersLLC.com or click the link below.